Hey, magical experimenters, Taylor Ellwood here, and I thought I would do an impromptu video today, Sunday, because it's been an interesting weekend, and really because I've been thinking about this particular topic a bit. I'm going to actually be writing a blog post that this video is going to be embedded in as well on this topic. So I wanted to talk about why none of us are special, when we're practicing magic per se, and why we need to recognize that desire for wanting to be special for what it is, and how it can get in the way of our magical practice. Because I think that in my experience as a magical practitioner, I can certainly say that with me pointing this finger right now, that I'm pointing like three back at myself. So I want to be very clear about that. But I notice that sometimes, there's a tendency, and maybe this is more because of Facebook, but I remember it back in the early days of being on newsletter or email listservs and stuff like that. There's a tendency for people to sometimes get caught up in their own hype and grandiosity, to feel a need to boast about their magical practice, to feel a need to, I don't know, to be recognized for how special they are. And like I said, I've been there, done that. I remember I was in my early 20s, and there was a point in time where I was calling myself an archmage. I mean, on the Z list, it was pretty, and a couple other email lists. And I remember emailing somebody once, and we were talking, and he said, "Yeah," and he had to know it was me, of course. So of course he was really calling me out, but in an understudy way. He's like, "Yeah, somebody was calling themselves an archmage. How silly is that?" And I thought, "Yep, that's me." And boy, did I stop doing that after that, because I felt I like he totally called me out. Like, here I was trying to give myself this title, this label, trying to make myself feel special, and why was I doing that? Like, why did that even matter? And the conclusion that I really came to was that the reason that it seemed to matter at the time is that it was more important for me to have that recognition than to actually do the work. And so I see that sometimes now, even in social media. And again, if I'm pointing my finger at anyone, I'm pointing it at my three of them back at myself, because sometimes I've been that way too. I mean, I think back to a few years ago where I was really caught up in my own hype and press, and even it's one of the reasons why I'm so transparent about my mistakes at this point. Like, about when I make mistakes, in my spiritual work. Why, and why I call myself out the way that I do, because I think it's really important to recognize that sometimes we get caught up in these ego games where we want to appear a certain way, to come off a certain way, and the fact of the matter is we're not necessarily that way at all. Um, we're all trying to do the best we can with the spiritual practices, the magical practices that we're doing, and we're all trying to learn something and get somewhere. But sometimes people get caught up in that experience of the result, or they pull off an amazing magical ritual or whatever, and then all of a sudden they're like, "Ooh, I'm so special." Well, I mean, how many other people out there have maybe pulled off that same magical ritual and aren't boasting about it? How many people are doing something, significant with their work, but not necessarily sharing it or talking about it? I think that, and I think really, I mean, this is a human condition. I'm not going to just label this as something like occultists do, because I mean, you look to anyone, at any person on any path in life, and you're going to find that there are people that make fools of themselves, who feel the need to boast and beat their chest and show how special they are. And you're going to find other people who are just kind of doing their work and doing the thing. And I would say too that, like, there's nobody out there that's perfect. Like, there's nobody out there that hasn't made a mistake or done stuff or things like that. And I think we need to recognize that, because when we bring that level of humble awareness into our spiritual practice, then we're not getting caught up in the need to label ourselves. We're not saying, "Oh, I'm a god," or I'm this, or I'm that, or you know, I'm the 10th generation lineage holder of X, Y, and Z. Like really, what do those titles honestly matter? What does it even matter if you're quote unquote a god? I mean, if you are a god, hey, great. But, I mean, what does that even really mean? And I find it interesting when people feel that need to label themselves that way. And no, I'm not referring to that one guy, EA Coding or whatever. I mean, I know he does the whole living God thing, but I mean, just in general, I've noticed this sometimes where people will get so caught up in stuff, and they won't be able to acknowledge or admit that, in fact, they're just human beings who make mistakes. And the need sometimes, and that yes, sometimes they pull off some impressive feats. I mean, I've done some impressive stuff in my life. Sure, that's great. But I've also made some mistakes. Sometimes I've given bad advice to people. Sometimes I've hurt other people. Sometimes I've done other things. And sometimes I've really just been an idiot and a fool. And I'm not saying this to get down on myself. The point that I'm trying to make here is just that it's like, you're not perfect, okay? You're not special any more than anyone else is. Now, you may have some special talents. You may have some things that are worth recognizing. Like maybe you're musically gifted, or maybe you are a gifted magician, or maybe you're X, Y, and Z, whatever. And that's cool. And I'm not saying we shouldn't acknowledge our gifts or appreciate them, because we should. But we shouldn't let our talents become the end all be all of who we are. And we should also remember that even if you're talented, you're still going to make mistakes sometimes. You're still going to mess up. You're not any more special than anyone else is. And telling yourself otherwise is really just doing yourself a disservice. And in the case of other people that might come to you for advice and learning and whatever else, it's doing them a disservice too. Because you're selling them a fake bill of goods. And again, this is why this is why I'm so transparent about stuff. Because if I'm going to write books on magic, if I'm going to teach classes on magic, you better believe that I should at the very least be able to say, oh, and hey, by the way, here's some mistakes I made along the way, as well as here's the things that I did great. And the reason for that is just it's very simple. I don't ever want people to buy into a sense of authority with me, or like a guruhood type thing, or things like that, because I mean, in the end of the day, like, I may have some special talents or skills or whatever, but that doesn't in the end automatically make me a better person. I still struggle, I still make mistakes, I still have to deal with the consequences and impacts of my choices. Some of those are good and some of those aren't so good. And when we recognize that, and we recognize that we're not automatically special, and that we don't buy into the need to label ourselves as a god or an archmage or whatever else, but instead really just approach things from the perspective of, here's my practice, and here's the work that I'm doing, and here's the way that I'm using it to hopefully better my life and hopefully better the lives of other people around me, or at the very least just trying to get somewhere better. Then oh, you get to hear my laundry buzzer in the background. But then you get to hopefully come to a better place of awareness within yourself. And you're not putting yourself on a pedestal, and you're not letting other people put you on a pedestal, because you recognize that, okay, at the end of the day, I'm no more inherently special than anyone else. I may have certain skills and talents, I may be better at certain things, but I guarantee you, the things that you're great at, there's going to be things you're not so good at. I mean, I'm not good at math, for example, and I'm learning how to play guitar right now, and I'm okay at it. I mean, it's fun. I'm mainly doing it for fun. I'm not doing it to become a guitar virtuoso. And I would say even like if you were to look at me like in terms of like magic stuff, I mean there's certain things that I'm really good at magically. There's other things that I know next to nothing about. Like if you were to ask me questions about hoodoo or stuff like that, I don't know anything about that stuff. Um, I would point you in the direction of someone else who knows better because that's that's not my wheelhouse. It's not my area of expertise. But even like the things that I'm great at, I've still had to make mistakes along the way. I've still had my mess ups and things like that. I mean, I haven't gotten to where I've gotten to because I never made a mistake. I've gotten to where I've gotten to because I made mistakes and I learned from them. And I think that when we recognize that in our spiritual practice and we don't as a result buy into this hype of I'm the special kind of being, when you buy into that hype, you're setting yourself up for a fall. And I mean, hey, sometimes that's what we need. I, and again, I say that from experience. Sometimes you need to fall. Sometimes you need to hit bottom, and then figure your way back up. And as a result, you'll come out of it different. I mean, I experienced that 3 years ago. I'm experiencing it now with some recent events in my life where I I made some mistakes and I'm having to, I'm learning from them and everything. But I did hit bottom there for a bit, and that's okay. I mean, that's part of living life, and I think it's not often said enough that you're gonna make mistakes, that you're not gonna always succeed, that you're gonna fail sometimes, that you're gonna look like a fool or an idiot or whatever, and that other people will sometimes judge you and will think they know your experience better than you, when in fact they really don't. Your experience is your own, but don't get caught up in the grandiosity of that experience either. Like, if you can, avoid making that mistake, because trust me when I tell you, you will be better off for not making that particular mistake in your life. It is so easy. It is so easy to get caught up in our sense of pride. And it is so important to sometimes recognize that that sense of pride is in and of itself a trick. It's a delusion, and it can lead us down the wrong path. All right, that's my sermon for the day. Thought I would share that with you guys, and I hope you found it helpful, and I'll see you sometime this coming week.